So it is just about 10 o'clock. Welcome everybody back. We're going to take some time and let everybody get online. Our guest today is Burke Nihill, who is the president and CEO of the Titans. Burke, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. How are you, sir?
I'm good. So we typically start, it's been about a month since we've done one of these things. We took a month off and then we decided to start off with a bang by having you as our guest. And as most people know who watch this, the first question while we're waiting for everybody to get on is usually somewhat irrelevant. And when you got on, I was admiring the room that you're in. It looks like it has no pictures. It looks like you're hidden away someplace. Where are you?
Yes. No pictures. When I walk out of this room, I'll have to kind of turn sideways so I don't bump my head on the ceiling. I am in our attic bonus room. It's where I take quiet meetings. Our house is not all that big, and so I've got 3 kids running around the house, and this is the only place that I can really get away.
So is it enough where more than 2 people can get in there? Obviously you take meetings, but it looks very confined.
It's pretty tight. So right down the middle is the only place that I can stand up. So if you get off to the sides, I have to turn off. And so it's longer than it is wide. And so there could be some people at the other end. It wouldn't have much to do up here because it is, the ceilings are so low, but it's a tight space, but it works well. It's a nice little getaway nook for me.
Is it? It looks like it's padded. So is that what it is? Is it insulation, or it's just the way it looks on the screen?
It might have been a good idea to pad it. It's just drywall. Just
okay. All right. Good. All right. And so we have a kind of an attic like that, and it gets really hot during the summer. Even though it's ventilated, it gets really hot. So do you have some type of air conditioning or something?
We've got a window unit, but I'm glad it's 10 o'clock in the morning. And if it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it's hard to regulate the temperature up here.
Okay, well, we will try not to make it too hot for you or too difficult, but we're really glad that you're on. Guest today is Burke Nihill, president and CEO of the Tennessee Titans. So it has been a while since we've done one of these shows. I was talking to Joyce, who helps me put on this hour-long show, and we're listing some of the really sad things that have happened in this country, particularly in the last couple of weeks. All the shootings, the one in Buffalo, Laguna Hills at a church. Then we obviously had the Uvalde school shooting. Not even sure. I'm not even sure if I can say anything about that. Just that makes me too sad and depressed. Racine, Wisconsin, and Tulsa, Oklahoma, and there were 5, at least 5. I may have missed some shootings in the last couple of weeks, and we may eventually have a discussion with somebody about that on one of these calls. But I know there's a lot of activity around those things at this point. So I'll leave it at that. Brenda Wynn, our county clerk, is on today. Welcome, Brenda. And it's a pretty day, and so we'll go ahead and get started. So Burke, tell me, the first question always to everybody is, tell me a little bit about yourself. Where were you born? What did you do? And how did you end up in an attic as president?
Well, if you want to go all the way back, I was born in Guam. My father was in the Navy at the time, and my first crib was about a month in a hotel. My parents pulled out a a dresser drawer, put some blankets in it, and that was the first month of my life. I grew up in Illinois, the suburbs of Illinois. I've forgiven my parents for not raising me in Nashville. It's taken a while, but we got down here as soon as we could. We've been in town for about 6 years. raising Tennessee kids, and really enjoying doing it. I'm married to my beautiful wife, Holly. We've been married for 20 years next week. We've got 3 kids, junior daughter and 2 sons. Will be I'm sorry, I need to graduate my daughter. My daughter is going to be a senior now. And my sons are sophomore and 6th grade. I'm a lawyer by trade. I was in private practice for a while. I jumped around to a couple corporations working in-house as a lawyer. My last stop before moving to Nashville was at a technology firm out of Silicon Valley. And I moved to Nashville to be a lawyer for the Titans, and was promoted into this role when my mentor and friend, Steve Underwood, retired just as COVID was starting. It would have been the spring of 2020.
You don't have the mustache that Steve Underwood has.
And nor am I remotely capable of growing that mustache. It is impressive facial hair for sure.
He was easily recognizable all over town, because I would every so often would run into him in the grocery store, and it's like, I know that man.
he just such a great guy. I actually saw him 2 weekends ago. He's doing great, really enjoying retirement. And he and his wife love traveling to interesting places around the country, even internationally if they can. They're very kind of studied in American history and European history. And so now that parts of the world are opening up a little bit, they're really enjoying retirement, getting around and getting to see things.
Well, let me ask you this. Did you ever in your dreams growing up think that you would be the head of a pro national league football team?
No, sir. I had dreams of being the third baseman for the Chicago Cubs. I did have that dream. That one was eliminated sometime, probably 4th grade or 5th grade. Realized that was not likely in my future. I loved sports. Really, really loved sports, and I'm kind of a realist. And I met my wife in college, and was pretty obvious we were on track to get married and have kids young. And sports is hard to get into from a business perspective. There's just not that many jobs, and it can be a grind. And so I never really seriously considered it as a career. I enjoyed classes I took related to the law. I didn't know any lawyers. My dad was a dentist. My extended family were mostly electricians and in the trades. But I knew that I liked the classes that I took that related to law, constitutional law and business law and that sort of thing. So that's what I decided to do after college to help support my family, and was just very, very fortunate that was in the right place at the right time a few years ago when the Titans had an opening for the general counsel position. And we're actually very open to bringing in somebody without sports experience. They had a lot of people on staff that had plenty of sports experience. Steve Underwood was actually the general counsel for a long time with the Titans. So they felt like they might just have the sports angle of all of it covered. And we're in some ways looking for a fresh perspective to have somebody from outside the industry come in and play the part of general counsel. So in a funny way, my being outside the industry was actually something of a help to landing this position. So I really never dreamed of it, and there's a certain irony about it, because we get phone calls all the time from people who are in college or even younger that are already setting those dreams and looking for advice about how to achieve them. And I can tell them stories I've heard, but it's hard to tell them to follow my path, because it's not a straight line, that's for sure.
I got it. Well, it's certainly an interesting path. Where'd you go to law school?
I went to Chicago, Kent.
Okay, I got it. And were you living in Silicon Valley when you moved over?
No, I was still living in it was the border of the suburbs of Illinois. Border of the suburbs of Chicago. Our backyard looked out onto horse country and farms. We were about an hour and a half outside of the city. My wife grew up on a farm, and so we'd kind of split the difference in terms of where we were living. And my company VMware was the name of the company. They're based in Silicon Valley, but they had offices in Austin and Atlanta and Washington, D.C. And so my office, for better or worse, was very often an airplane. I worked out of my house before it was in vogue, coming out of COVID, and would just travel from office to office pretty regularly, and work from Palo Alto or work from Atlanta or some other office.
Okay, well, being in the position that you are now, and you don't have to answer this question, but is your ultimate dream job to be head of the Chicago Cubs?
No, sir. It is absolutely to be the president and CEO of the Tennessee Titans. I am just my wife and I look at each other very often and just shake our heads about how fortunate we've been to be in this position. And I just love the Adams family, the owners of the team, this city. My wife has said several times, if I was interested in pursuing something else outside of the city, I should plan on coming home on weekends back to Nashville. Our family is planted here. I made the joke at the beginning that I've forgiven my family or my parents for not raising me here. We really do just love this community, and it was the strangest thing to be moving from a place we'd lived our whole lives and just immediately feel a sense of home that we'd never felt before. There's just something about the people here, the overall feel of the city that we would never live anywhere else. I am a big fan of the Chicago Cubs, though. I was very pleased with the World Series win a few years ago, and we usually try to get up to Wrigley every couple of years or so to take in a game. But I'm very, very pleased and happy and at home here.
I think that's a good answer. I was going to say, if you were president and CEO of the Cubs, you could insert yourself at third base in the lineup.
Well, that is true. But no, I'm okay. I'm good.
Okay, you're good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, before we get into probably the majority of this conversation, which is going to be around the stadium, possibilities of a new stadium, the area around the stadium. Let me ask you, what do you know, I know that John Robinson, deals with the players and everything, and you've got Coach Vrabel that does that. But what do you think of the team coming up for this year?
Yeah, I was just talking to John about the team yesterday, and I mean, excitement's in the air. The defense last year in particular, last game did not go the way we wanted it, but there's not a lot of teams that can record 9 sacks in a game. And that's what our defense did in the playoff game. And the draft, John is just tickled with how the draft unfolded, and the players are adapting well. They're learning. They're getting better every day. And I don't know that a lot of people recognize this, but John Robinson has now been general manager since 2016. And we are at this point, since he took over the team as general manager, he inherited literally the worst team in the league. We had the number 1 pick that year. He traded it away, but the number 1 pick goes to the team that is by definition the worst team in the league by record. And since the first day that he stepped in as general manager, we've had a winning record every single season. And there's only 2 teams in the NFL that can say that. So it's really an exciting time to be a Titan and to be a Titans fan, because consistent successes, it's rare. And John and Mike have, with Amy's support, built a team that can say that. And so I think there's reason for optimism every year. There's a track record of it now.
Well, that's a good start before the season starts. Tell me, so you've been here for a while. You've seen the Titans. What do you consider? I mean, how do the Titans play into the overall their role in the city of Nashville? What is, what do you see the role of the Titans as it fits into the city?
Yeah, I think we're still trying to figure that out, and I hope that we're always trying to figure that out. 2 or 3 years ago, we actually stepped back. It's an interesting time to be a part of this organization, because we obviously came from Houston. There were several people that still worked for the organization, including Steve Underwood, who had come from Houston and were part of planting roots in Nashville and being a part of that era. And a few years ago, we took a step back to say, what have we learned? Who are we? And Amy has really empowered our organization to think like a startup. So we referred to ourselves very often as a 60-year-old startup. Our organization has 60 years of experience and tradition, and those are important things that we can lean on. It's a good foundation. We're not starting in a garage, but she lets us think like a startup in terms of innovation and audacity and reinventing ourselves. And one of the first exercises we went through as we were trying to think about ourselves in that way and really, step back, having been in Nashville now for a couple decades. And the first thing we did was talk about our purpose, talk about our mission. And we had a mission statement at the time. It was 80 or 90 words long, and there was a sign up in the break room, and the words weren't even bad words. They just weren't memorable, and they didn't really drive anything in our business. And so we took quite a while and asked ourselves who we could be, who we should be. We asked our employees, why do they work here? I mean, it's obviously an exciting thing to get an invitation to work at an NFL team, but at some point the special nature of a business card wears off a little bit. And why do people still enjoy the opportunity to work here? And the purpose, the mission, the why of our organization, we got it down from 80 or 90 words down to 3 words. We exist to win, to serve, and to entertain. And to win is obvious enough. We just talked about wanting to be a winning football program. At the end of the day, I think every organization should try to be good at what the core part of their business is, and ours is winning football games. Entertaining, sticking to the end. That should be obvious for an organization like ours, right? Every time we open our doors, whether it's for a football game or a concert or some sort of other cultural event at the stadium, people should have a good time, right? This is, at the end of the day, entertainment. But it's that middle word, serve, that I think was the one that stood out to us as much as anything. That's the nature of the people who have joined our organization over time, but especially over the last 3 or 4 years. Their why they love working for our organization, why they look forward to the future of our organization, is because we see that we've got a very special and unique opportunity in this community to serve this community. And that's in a number of different ways. Certainly, we've had far too many natural disasters in this city over the last few years, and our community can count on us to be there, and not with a check, although probably with a check, but like literally showing up, right? Like getting buses and getting our players and coaches and employees on the ground, moving tree stumps and cleaning out kitchens and whatever is necessary. There is this kind of draw to actually get on the ground and help. And whether that was the tornado at the beginning of 2020, you may have seen after the flood in Waverly, we sent some folks out to clean out houses and do that sort of thing. But we also started asking ourselves, how can we, with the resources we have, how can we serve in ways that are different than other organizations? And when we figured out that their football team wasn't going to be able to play at their field that year, we welcomed them to Nissan Stadium to play one last home game. And they had their homecoming at the facility. These are the sorts of things that really, we feel like we've got a unique opportunity that makes our organization, for whatever reason, sports carries a certain power and influence, and it has a certain number of resources that are just unique to other businesses. And we feel like that's a part of our purpose. It's something we lean into. It's on signs in our building now. It comes up in a good chunk of strategy and business meetings. How can we, in this environment, how can we serve our community? We feel like we've got a real opportunity, and we should take advantage of it. 10 years from now, Nashville, house by house, block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood, community as a whole should be better in tangible ways because of the things that we have put our thought and our minds and our resources to. And it's really inspiring, and we feel a privilege to be able to step into that place.
So the service commitment is obviously very, very important to a number of us. And I guess maybe I should ask you in this way. So when you talk about it 5 years, 10 years down the road, without and that'll morph eventually into what you are interested in doing around the stadium piece. But how do the Titans see themselves playing a role in the next 5, 10, 15,
Yep.
20 years in Nashville?
Well, so yeah, I should probably look back and look ahead. I mean, I haven't been here the whole time, but I'm very proud, having looked back at the work that this organization has done to serve the community over the last 20 plus years. You know, a lot of funds have been invested in great causes and initiatives in this city. A lot of people hours spent serving this community. One of the things that we observed in this step back, in this 60-year-old startup mode, was that it's really hard to see a lot of tangible difference, right? Like, we know how much investment we made, and we're sure that we've changed lives during that 20-year period. But what we've challenged ourselves to do is to find things where there's an intersection of what it is that we have in terms of resources and influence and a spotlight in this community, and try to intersect with some of the greatest needs in this community. And we don't have all the answers yet. We're in the middle of going through that process, but we have totally overhauled how we do our foundation, how we manage community engagement. We recently made a hire that I'm very excited about. Several hires that we've made. Adolfo Birch, he grew up in Nashville. His father was an influential judge in Nashville. The federal courthouse is named after him, across from City Hall. And Adolfo, really, really talented gentleman, went to Harvard, went to Vanderbilt Law School, and he was serving in our league office for 25 years. And he wanted to come home and bring his talent to serving his community. And we've just set him loose doing that. And again, in more of a information gathering phase, trying to kind of define how we can do things. He spends his days getting out into the community, bringing me to meetings when there's things that I need to hear and I need to learn about. And we have grown the team under him. We recently hired Jahari Matthews, who's been with the YMCA for a while. And her role under Adolfo is going to be to define literal programs that we can stand up, that all of this, the goal would be to have 5, 10, 15 years down the road, we can actually look at these programs and say, this household changed, this person's life changed, this block changed, this neighborhood changed. And we don't have the answers yet, but we're excited to be on this journey. And with the talent that has gravitated towards the organization, we're just honored that they're here. And I couldn't be more confident that they're really going to find ways that we can make a difference.
Good. Very good. All right. So tell me, okay, so let's morph over to the actual kind of what's going on. What are the possibilities with the stadium and the area around it? And I guess the first question would be kind of, if you don't mind, give us a the background of how we got to this point right now. So I remember the stadium being built. I think the first year in the stadium was 1999. I may be wrong on the exact, or maybe it was right around there. But kind of tell us, what's going on in terms of how we got to this point.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think it probably does make sense to start in the 90s. And the Nashville was hoping to attract professional sports, and was actually well underway doing that and building what is now Bridgestone Arena, in the hopes of attracting an NBA or an NHL team. And somewhere in there, Bud Adams, our founder, was in Houston as the owner of the Houston Oilers, and had decided to look around and potentially relocate his football team to another city. And there were really attractive options for him if it was just about kind of the certainty of a stadium and the financial implications of a stadium. And Baltimore, for example, already had a stadium ready to go. It was fully financed. And a lot of the executives at the Oilers at the time were really pushing Mr. Adams to take the Baltimore option. But he just felt a connection with this city and with this state. And he asked them, by hook or by crook, let's make this work. He really envisioned his team being in Nashville and being in Tennessee. And it was a challenge for the city at the time with the project already underway, with Bridgestone Arena underway. So there were minimum requirements at the time for an NFL team, and the city and the team came together to find a way to meet those minimum requirements and build a football stadium and get the team here. And it was a really successful effort. Looking back, the stadium was built to get that done, right? To have a place for the team to move. And what we have learned over the last 5 or 6 years, in particular over the last 3 or 4 months, is that the stadium was not likely built, trying to be a 100-year-old building, but was built to get the job done. And so where we are, and where we've really been trying to find a solution for the last 5 or 6 years, is that there's a lease that requires the city to maintain the building in a term called first class condition. And first class condition is something of a complicated standard, but it's more or less just keeping up with most other NFL buildings, in particular buildings that were built 10 years before or after Nissan Stadium. And for the last 5 or 6 years, it's become obvious as the building's condition has deteriorated, despite all of our best efforts to keep it in good shape, that this is going to be a really heavy lift to get the building into that condition and to put it in a place that's going to stand the test of time, another 20, 30, 40 years. So we've been partnering with Mayor Cooper and his administration. We've even had conversations before Mayor Cooper's administration about how we can come together to take what's a situation that's challenging, a building that's showing its age and is showing signs of probably not having a lot of longevity, and how do we work on a solution that is more sustainable. And where we are today is just exploring those options. And as I'm sure a lot of the folks on this line know, one of those options, and probably plan A at this point, is exploring the possibility of building a completely new building and doing it in a way that is designed to more easily stand the test of time, that will certainly be a 40, 50, 60-year solution, after some contractor reports are showing that it's very unlikely that that's going to be the case with this particular structure, the current Nissan Stadium.
All right. So one obvious question that pops up is, when the original stadium was built, I mean, people look at different places. Probably the most classic example to me would be Atlanta and Turner Field, which lasted about 20 years, and then they built a new stadium in Marietta for the Braves. Why do stadiums usually only get built for a 20 to 25-year lifetime? Obviously, they're very expensive, and people know that, and that comes with the territory. But why do you build a building that's not going to last all that long?
I don't have a good answer for you on buildings that haven't lasted that long. I will tell you that it's absolutely where we sit today, is that whatever the solution is on this particular building, it's not a 20-year solution. It's 50, 60 years plus. There are building methodologies that will allow a reasonable expectation that a building lasts much longer than that. I would observe too that obviously outdoor facilities end up having more of a challenge on longevity than indoor facilities. It's part of the reason why there is an attraction to thinking about building a building with an enclosure. It's just not exposed to the elements. A lot of the issues that Nissan Stadium faces are because it's now in its entering its third decade of being exposed to extremes of the heat and cold in the winter and a lot of rain that happens in Nashville. And the concrete's having a hard time holding up to that. The result of the concrete having a hard time holding up to that is that there's expansion joints and there are cracks in the concrete that ultimately find their way into other parts of the building that challenge interior spaces. And but again, I don't know the answer to why some of these buildings haven't lasted, or why they were built not to last. But I can tell you that that's something that to the extent Titans have something to do with this, and I think we do, we're absolutely committed to finding something more sustainable, something that everyone can have an expectation is going to be a longer term solution and not something that's just going to fill a gap for 20 years.
Okay. So okay, so one option that obviously you look at is a dome stadium, and but before I get to that one, is there so one of the obvious questions would be, if that doesn't work out, is there a better alternative to deal with the current stadium and put some money in, whether it's city, state, Titans, whatever it is, to actually put that one kind of back together and get it in a better situation? Is that even on the table?
It is not off the table. I would tell you that was 100% the focus for about 2 years. We looked at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami as a model. Hard Rock Stadium took a building that was similar in terms of amenities and its general layout, and they invested about $500 million, which is a lot of money, but certainly less than a new building, in what was a complete overhaul of the building, and made it a modern facility. It's a modern fan experience. They did a lot of things to make the building more sustainable, that would put it in a position to survive, decades. And that was our goal. We figured that was the most modest approach to bring the building into first-class condition, and expecting that it would be in that state for a very long time. Unfortunately, there were just building conditions that didn't jump out in the initial studies that did in a study that we performed over the winter. We had 2 different contractors that came in and priced out what it would cost to do something of a Hard Rock level renovation. And there were a lot of things that just needed to be completely just either redone or reinforced. And as much as anything, the caution of these contractors was that this is not necessarily something that's going to be a 50-year building, which is what it would be if we made that sort of investment, and the team, city, anyone else doing any sort of financing to support that investment. You'd really need to make a commitment to another 30 years, which makes it a 50-year building by the time all the projects would be done. So it's not something that's off the table. Plan A at this point is pretty clearly a new building, but that's because it's the holistic solution. That's the one that is much easier to expect longevity. It's one that solves as many problems as possible in terms of how the neighborhood would set up, in terms of the opportunities that it would present. It seems to be the one that, if we can put this all together in a way that lives into principles about not raising taxes and that sort of thing, would be the wise approach. But it's not off the table that we would have to consider something else.
Okay, so tell people who are watching about what would a new stadium look like, a retractable roof, how many seats would be envisioned, and then we'll get into kind of the I guess the idea about how to pay for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, we are looking at an enclosure. It's something that it makes it easier to picture a longer life of a building. It's also something that makes a building like a stadium much more useful for cultural events. There's more months that a building's not going to sit vacant because it can be used over the winter. There's just many more cultural opportunities that would come with an enclosed building. And by the way, I'm not just referring to things that people may think of as the obvious, like a Super Bowl or WrestleMania or NCAA championships. There's things like conventions. There's things like concerts and the arts that our goal would be to have a building that could have great shows in March and make this community asset just that much more useful to the community. We would be looking at probably less seats than our current stadium. That was something that we were looking at in a renovation scenario as well. It's actually a trend in many sports venues is to not have not start off with how many seats can you fit into a building, and then you've got a lot of very high level upper deck seats, but you start off with what are the right seats. What are the right amount of seats, and it would still probably be in the 60,000 seat range. Our current building is 69,000. So give or take, it's analysis that we're undertaking, but we would be building the right amount of seats, the right character of seats, rather than just kind of picking a number and trying to fit them in. In terms of whether it would be a retractable roof or a fixed roof, it's too early to make any sort of declaration on that. There's a lot of things that we understand the public is very interested to know, and we will provide answers as soon as we actually have answers. But we also don't want to rush, and in my mind, the easiest way to make sure that we make mistakes here is to just move too quickly. We are taking a measure twice, cut once approach to really every aspect of this project. And in terms of the retractable roof, the thing that I will say, and I think people can draw their own conclusions from this, but the retractable feature is very expensive. It can cost sometimes $100 million or more to build the mechanism to make a roof retractable. And our research shows that most retractable roofs only have the roof open about 3% of the time for events. Most venues that pay for the retractable function leave it closed, leave the roof closed most of the time, and so they're not actually getting the value out of that function. And we're trying to take a budget-driven process. We have started to talk to an architect, and the number one principle, far beyond any other character of the building, is that we want a budget-driven design. We want something that's a beautiful building that Nashville can be proud of, that is full of the character that Nashville deserves, but also one that is, from the very beginning, not built thinking about the greatest features that could be built into a building, but thinking about making a responsible, wise, budget-driven approach. So again, not off the list to have a retractable feature, but there are reasons why it's not as attractive as it may seem at first blush. I would also say too, for those that think about an experience of being inside a building with a roof and missing the elements, there is new technology that is really pretty exciting, and no longer do you need to, in a stadium like that, look up at steel and trusses. There is now translucent roofs. They have them at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, SoFi. Not that there's going to be much of a comparison between SoFi and any stadium that the Titans would build. That's much more opulent than we would build. But the feature of the roof, if you've ever had the opportunity to stand in those buildings, it's really pretty neat because you still get the sunlight coming through. It's a totally different feel than the typical building that just is a mess of steel up on the roof. So if we were to look at a fixed roof, that is something that we would be focused on is that translucent feature.
And can those stadiums, if it's retractable or not, based upon a dome type stadium, can they be built? In the one that pops to mind is like the Mercedes Stadium in Atlanta. But you look at the Superdome in New Orleans; those things can be built to last for a long time. Is that right? I mean, so if you're talking about a 50 to 60 year building, those things can be built if they're done correctly to last that long.
Absolutely. Proper maintenance and proactive maintenance is required, of course, but it's the sort of thing that you can expect to last decades. And I know we'll get to this in a minute, but one of the principles that we're paying attention to in conversations with the mayor's office is being sure that there is a really healthy budget that is not a budget that comes from the general taxpayers' budget to keep the building well maintained. A capital expense budget that would be in the hundreds of millions of dollars to be able to do that proactive maintenance and to keep the building relevant for decades to come.
Well, go back. You had mentioned the term first-class condition, and you're a lawyer. I'm a lawyer. I know that you can get into, what exactly does that mean? But I know one of the things that's out there is that the city does have some responsibility under the existing contracts to keep the thing in first-class condition. So there is some money involved at this point, and the number 30 million keeps popping into my head. Something that, and again, without getting too far into the weeds on this thing, has been floated as something that the city may be responsible for in terms of some of the work that's been done on the stadium. Again, without going too far or going into something you don't want to, can you elaborate a little bit on that? And then we'll move into, okay, understanding that, what might a new stadium cost?
Sure. So yeah, the lease, what the lease says is that that the building should be maintained in first-class condition, and there's a separation between the things that the Titans are responsible for and the things that the city is responsible for to keep the building in first-class condition. The Titans are responsible for our locker room. We're responsible for our team offices. We're also responsible for the luxury suites. So the luxury suites and all of the features that would go into that. Everything else, the lease, the Metropolitan Sports Authority is responsible to cover. And so the number $30 million that you referenced, that's over the last 3 or 4 years. We have just continued to try to maintain the building as well as we can, not going on offense and doing a lot of fan experience elements, but things like repairing expansion joints. We've spent $12 or $13 million over the last, say 4 or 5 years on repairing expansion joints just to keep the building from continuing to leak and to do this preventative maintenance. Those are expenses that the lease would put on the sports authority, and all of those expenses have added up to an account receivable, to use an accounting term, of about $30 million that the Titans have invested, but it's work that the lease would require the sports authority to be funding. Looking ahead, our current lease doesn't expire until the end of this decade. The Titans also have an option to extend the lease for another 10 years beyond that to almost 2040. And so in theory, this lease would require the city to sit in this position of maintaining the building in first-class condition through that time. I should also say first-class condition isn't just playing defense and keeping the building in a state of good repair and from breaking down, but it's also, there's a keep up standard to it as well, because the NFL has certain expectations about buildings, and there's this evolution of buildings over time. And there's the standard, the easiest way to put it is buildings that were built 10 years before or after Nissan Stadium. So basically in the 90s or the 2000 to 2010 period. There's a couple specific buildings that are listed beyond just NFL buildings within that period. One of them you just mentioned, which was Turner Field in Atlanta. So you are seeing some of these buildings that are comparable facilities that the lease would require that we continue to invest to keep up with and to maintain relevance and a modern fan experience. Some of these buildings have closed and have been replaced by newer buildings, and other ones are buildings like Miami's Hard Rock that have comprehensive renovations that have changed the entire building. So one of the principles that we have maintained with Mayor Cooper from the beginning is that's the reality, right? That's where we are. That's what this lease says. And yet nobody wants to live into this. Nobody wants to actually just continue to take one foot in front of the next and keep these bills getting higher, whether to just keep the building maintained or to start bringing it up, back up to standards. So we've been trying to find solutions that frankly just rip up this lease and come up with a new mechanism that ultimately shifts all of that risk for maintaining the building and capital expenses and the rest of it to shift it over to the Titans, to take the taxpayer out of that position where that risk is on the taxpayer, and instead put the Titans in that position. And, truth be told, to do so by reinvesting in the building. That was the initial effort. Now plan A is potentially building a new building that is done in partnership with the city. Also, without using general taxpayer funds from Nashville, but to find some interesting new revenue streams, to use revenue streams from the building itself to get the building in a better place, or to get to a new building, and then to find some of those funds that we could continue to keep the building well maintained, a capital expense fund. But whatever the last backstop, the whatever the cost overruns, or whatever the building will cost to maintain over the term of the lease, the last stop will be the Titans instead of the taxpayer, which is what it's been for the last 20 plus years. We want ourselves in that position. It's a very uncomfortable position, as we started off today talking about service, right? We understand that things that would put a strain on the taxpayer, that's not serving our community well. And so we want to find a solution with the city to take the taxpayer out of that position and put ourselves in that position, so that we can take on that burden. We can maintain the building and do so without a strain on the taxpayers.
Okay, all right. So take that understanding, and obviously different ways to do different things with this. But overall, the cost of having to pay for a new stadium, particularly if you take that last piece, you take that off of the city taxpayers in terms of trying to keep the thing up. I know that I know the Titans have worked with the state. The state has said they'll obligate up to $500 million for a dome stadium. And I know that you've got lots of different things going on. So again, without saying anything that you don't need to say, tell us the overall cost of something like this, and what are possibilities about how to fund this thing.
Yeah, it's plan A, new stadium is expensive, owing to inflation over the last few years. Minnesota Stadium, US Bank Stadium, is a beautiful domed facility, and it cost about $1 billion, maybe $1.1 billion to build, which is obviously a breathtaking amount of money too. But that same building today would cost closer to $2 billion to build without any additional features. Just the costs have risen. We are in the process of doing really deep analysis to understand as best as we can, very specifically what a building on the site that we're talking about would cost. The early estimates, we're not done yet, but the early estimates are somewhere between 1.9 billion and 2.2 billion dollars. So we've started to figure out how to get that done, living into the principles of taking the general taxpayer out of this risk position and using some more creative sources. You pointed out, we couldn't be more grateful to the state. They see the value of the Titans in the stadium in particular, and the stadium with an enclosure, and the types of new economic activity and cultural opportunities that would come from an enclosed stadium. And so they have committed up to $500 million to that purpose. The other thing that the state did was supported adding a 1% hotel occupancy tax. The city council would have to adopt that as well. But that 1%, the additional 1%, can also be used to help finance the stadium. They've also helped contribute sales tax revenue from inside the building, and from any sort of sales taxes that are generated from what would be any sort of campus development. So as of today, there's more or less 100 acres of dormant parking lots that certainly serve some use, but they're not generating sales tax. They're not really generating property tax. And so part of the plan, part of the idea from the beginning has been to allow some of that real estate, especially with all the activity happening on the East Bank with Oracle moving down the block, to fire up and do something special for the city and building a new neighborhood. But it would also generate taxes that don't exist today. And the state has committed 50% of the state's sales tax to stadium related funding. So those are the sorts of sources that we're trying to stack together. On top of that, the Adams family. I mentioned Bud Adams earlier. Bud had a lot of businesses in the oil and gas industry. He had farms. He had car dealerships, that sort of thing. In addition to owning the Titans, and our owners, Amy Adams Strunk, and her family, are all in on this, and so they're in the process of trying to liquidate as much of those old businesses as they can to ultimately come up with as much of an investment as we can make into the facility. We've committed to being sure that there's a private investment of at least $700 million that would go towards supporting the project, and we're continuing to look for ways to bring that number higher. So it would be a true partnership across the state, the city, and the Titans to bring this to reality, and to do so in a way that, again, isn't subjecting people's property taxes, isn't subjecting the general sales tax of the overall community to help support this building, but to do so with this generous, this state contribution, with these sources that are either tourist driven or related to the property itself, and then private investment. That's the goal, and we feel optimistic we'll be able to achieve it.
All right, so we've got a few minutes left. I guess a couple of other questions. One of the questions is going to be about I think you called it the campus around it. But the first question would be, if people were interested, and I know there are people interested, but if people are interested in understanding how maybe some other cities did this type of, when they came up with a new stadium or the financing for a new stadium, examples to look at. I mean, I would guess that you all do the same thing, because there's a limited number of NFL teams. So you look around at how other places are doing this. So other places that have done it, I don't even know how they did the SoFi Stadium out in LA. I'm not even sure if I want to know. But I guess the question is, if people were interested in looking at different models that have been used, any good examples for that?
They could not be more varied, but we've got some good examples in this city. Even Bridgestone Arena lease renewal follows some of the same principles about leveraging the tax revenue from inside the building and ticket taxes and that sort of thing to keep the building in great shape. And they did the same thing where the Sports Authority used to be in that kind of backstop risk position, and now that's shifted over to the Predators organization. There's examples in Las Vegas also used a hotel occupancy tax as a baseline for a public-private partnership. The Miami renovation was a very innovative approach, where it was really based on the number of events that they were able to generate in Miami. There was a trade-off of the fluctuating investment from the public tax dollars that would be tied to the number of events. Again, it's really all over the map. But I think maybe the best example is one from the last couple of years that I think is one that people looked at and thought was a pretty good outcome for the public and for the team, which was the Bridgestone Arena deal.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so in the last few minutes that we've got, tell me kind of the vision the Titans have for the campus. So depending on whether the original stadium is there or a new stadium, what's kind of the concept around it?
Yeah, so I think it's the same concept regardless of whether the stadium's in the same location or moves to the parking lot, between our current stadium and the highway. I think it's a recognition of the awesomeness of this opportunity. I don't mean just the cool factor. I mean the kind of inspiring nature of this opportunity. Let me say from the beginning, I don't know even where the Titans fit into all of this, other than we do know that we've got a seat at the table, right? We currently have 17 years of lease interest left And so, that gives us an opportunity to be a part of the conversations and help to shape what this may be. But this is a really central piece of real estate, both in terms of physical location and, in my mind, city planning importance. The East Bank is, I read something, it was an article from the early 90s when the team was coming to town. There was a thought that putting the stadium in that location would inspire development, and it really hasn't happened. There's industrial, there's some, La Quinta opened up recently. There's things that have happened, but it's not what I think the city necessarily pictured when they originally structured the transaction to put the stadium on the East Bank. But now it is happening. The growth of Nashville has gotten to the point that real estate like that is a really good opportunity to provide some new opportunities for the city. Oracle is building their campus at the edge of the East Bank, but the location of the stadium is really central to it's just across from downtown. You've got the pedestrian bridge, you have other bridges that exist there. And so we've recognized that with that seat at the table, the thing that we can do best is to use our influence, to use our resources to get out in the community and listen to the community about what they would like to see there. And it has really been a beautiful partnership with the city, because the city has been doing the same things. We've heard the same things. We're completely aligned on what we would like to see there. And that is a neighborhood that's built around Nashvillians, built around locals. And Nashville has an incredible downtown. I mean, it's a big part of what has made Nashville, and the reputation we've developed, and the economic engine of not just the city, but the state. And so what we're trying to do is recognize where this real estate is located with respect to that, but not replicate it, to do something different. And so that means things like an abundant amount of green space. It means looking for things that define neighborhood more than commercial districts and that sort of thing, right? A lot of people, when they hear about the possibility of building a stadium around, building a neighborhood around a stadium, they go directly to the Battery. You mentioned the Atlanta Braves new development. That's a wonderful, wonderful facility, and they've accomplished exactly what they tried to accomplish, which was building this development that's inspired by and is all about that baseball team. That's not what we want to see. People refer to that as a sports and entertainment district. We don't want a sports and entertainment district, because that's not what the community wants. We want to have a place that you just picture the best of Nashville, people from the surrounding neighborhoods, from East Nashville and from Casey, and just it's a place that locals can feel like is their own, and checks as many boxes as possible. So multimodal. It'll be a really exciting project to let unfold, and we're excited to have a seat at the table. Again, I don't know how exactly it will play out, but I'm very, very pleased that the city seems to be paying attention to the same things we're paying attention to. And this is it's the type of opportunity that most cities don't get. This is the sort of thing that if you get right, generations of Nashvillians will be looking back and wondering, how in the world people could have the forethought to, have done the things that they did as they're enjoying this property. It's not something that I think the city would ever let, developers just kind of take and build for the most profitable use. It's going to be something that is planned around, building something really special for the people who live here, and we're excited to ultimately live in that neighborhood.
Got it. All right. So one last question. Lots of discussion, lots of things that are going to be happening, lots of discussions that will continue. The time frame for all this stuff. There may not be a time frame, but maybe there is. Tell us, I guess, in your mind, what do you think is going to happen over the next 6 months, the next year? Are there any time elements built into this thing?
Yeah. So again, trying not to rush the process, because we feel like that's the best way to make a mistake. But I'll tell you the things that are happening now and how they they may unfold. We've been in conversations with the city for years, but these conversations are really are kind of hitting another level, just because a lot of puzzle pieces are falling into place. There is the state support. We are starting to better understand the limits of the private investment that we'll be able to make. We've got a lot of tools in the toolkit to start building a project. And so we will continue those conversations. And the hope would be that over the next several months, we'll be able to start, actually putting finishing touches on what would be something to start talking to the public about. Not there yet, but that would be the hope. In terms of a building itself, we have engaged an architect on a very conceptual, high-level basis, just to start articulating what can be done and to help us get better and deeper costing information on all of that. So those conversations will continue as well. Over the next few months, we want to just continue to talk to the public. We want to continue to talk to Titans fans, our neighbors, the community as a whole, and just get feedback about what the stadium, what this neighborhood could be. We've been doing this for a long time. I have just enjoyed it as much as I enjoy doing anything in my job is getting out into neighborhoods and just picking up a chair and sitting down and listening to people. And we will continue to do that over the next few months and longer if necessary. So that's the next few months. People have this question about how long it would take to potentially build a stadium. The reality is it's probably a 31-month build cycle, but that's after you have to go through all the design and the rest of it. So the most ambitious timeline would be a stadium completed sometime in 2026. That said, we're not going to rush a schedule solely for meeting some sort of deadline. We'll continue to put the right amount of thought into it, have the right conversations to be sure that if this opportunity does unfold, it's done in the right way. And again, generations of Nashvillians are looking back and pleased with the level of thought that went into it.
Well, Burke, I think we've hit 11 o'clock. There's probably a lot more questions to ask, but we'll give you a little bit of time, at least enough time to get out of the attic that you're in, and we will maybe invite you back as this process continues for a while. But I really do appreciate all the information, everything that you've given to us today. I know we got people watching, and people watch these things, and you've been very forthcoming and very much appreciated. So thank you for being here. Bill Koch is going to be our guest next week. He's the director of Nashville School of Law. So that should be interesting. I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend. Burke, again, good luck getting out of the attic, and we will see you around the community. All right.
Thank you very much, and thanks for everyone who joined. This was an honor to participate today. Thank you.
Everybody have a great weekend. Bye.
Take care.